the evidence points to one spot, one fight, and one person. That spot is here, the foot of the Calkins Rock. That fight took place right here for over an hour. And that person, the only person who walked away from that fight, is the defendant, Jordan Ryder. But before I get any further into the facts of today's case, I'd like to talk about the burden of proof, because it's a high one. Now, this is an aggravated murder trial. Aggravated because Parker Page was younger than 13 years old at the time of her death. And murder because we have charged the defendant of knowingly causing the death of the victim. Now, in order to convict the defendant today, you must find her guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Notice the word reasonable. This burden doesn't mean that you can't have any doubt, but your doubts must be reasonable or supported by something. Let's get into that distinction. Say it's a Sunday morning, you wake up, you turn on the news, the weather report says it rained last night. So you go outside and check the ground, everything's wet. You know beyond a reasonable doubt that it rained last night. Now, could there have been a tornado? Possibly, and you can have your doubt that there was a tornado last night, or even that your home in the middle of Nebraska experienced a tsunami, but that's not reasonable. It's not supported by evidence. Now, the defense stood here before you and said that the police rushed to their judgment in the conviction of Jordan Ryder. But they haven't given you any evidence as to the shortcomings of that investigation. The police only interrogated one person because only one person violated her parole by taking the victim away from her legal guardian. One person wrote a napkin admitting guilt. And members of the jury, one person gained $200,000 from the death of Parker Page. The defense will try to tell you that we don't have the full picture, but we do, and we made it into a timeline. So let's go over it. July 14th, 2018, noon. The defendant and the victim check into Calvin's campground, and you heard from Armani Rodriguez that during her first interaction with the defendant, she lied to her. 3 p.m., the hike begins. The defendant and the victim set out towards the running loop. Now, just 30 minutes later, Kelly Dew sees the defendant and the victim in a heat of a fight. Where? At the foot of the Calkins Road. Note that this is where the defendant robs the victim of the hiking stick. Now, at 4:30 p.m., an hour later, Kelly Dews circles all the way back to the same spot and hears the same fight. A whole hour has passed, yet the defendant and the victim haven't moved an inch. A few minutes later, after Kelly Dews had gone, Armani Rodriguez hears a scream loud enough to draw her out onto the trails. She dismisses it as a fox scare, but on her way back to her cabin, she hears one last scream. Simultaneously, Kelly Dews hears one last scream. I hate you! And then silence. A perpetual silence that will never be filled again. You see, after those screams at 4:40, no one ever heard the victim again. No one ever saw the victim again until the search party found her cold, lifeless body 40 feet below the same spot with the same fight where we know the defendant had access to the hiking. Around 5:30, Kelly Dews went back to check the scene. It was empty. Now, what happens next is just one big scramble. 6:30 p.m., Armani Rodriguez catches the defendant in yet another lie. this time about the victim's whereabouts. She said anything but the truth. Later, in the early hours of July 15th, through 10 a.m. to be exact, the defendant cashes in to the tune of $200,000 by increasing the life insurance on her dead daughter from the bare minimum to the absolute max. But unfortunately, the cold hard truth was found July 15th, 12:30 p.m., when the Midlands Police Force were led by Kelly Dukes to the same spot with the same fight, and a canine officer took them 40 feet down to the broken and bruised body of 12-year-old Parker Page. The evidence leaves you knowing this. This is the spot where the defendant and the victim fought for over an hour. This is the spot where the defendant gained access to the hiking stick. And 40 feet below, the victim was found dead with a bruise contralateral to all that matched that hiking stick. Now, your task as a jury is no small task. We know that it's hard to even imagine that a parent would do this to their child, but the evidence makes this horrible reality clear. The evidence points to one spot, one fight, and one person. And I ask that on behalf of the state of Midlands, you find that one person, the defendant, Jordan Ryder, guilty of aggravated murder. Thank you.